Was it Brian or Eric or
Brian was there.
Brian Turner?
Brian Turner and, was Eric there?
Oh, yeah.
I worked,
Then we had the principal there.
I worked for the school district for a year. They're back in 99. Actually, 98. So about 25 years ago. But all the same guys are still there.
That's funny. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Call this meeting to order. We welcome everybody to our Planning Commission regular scheduled meeting for the Harriman City Planning Commission this Wednesday, February 15th. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I believe I'll be leading you there. So please stand. Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thank you all. We do have a full quorum tonight with a couple of our alternates as well. We appreciate the attendance tonight for that. Go to item 3.3. Are there any conflicts of interest from anybody with any of the items tonight? No. Not tonight, huh, Daryl? Okay. Very good. We'll move on to item 4.1, which is review and consideration of final building elevations and landscape plans for a portion of the Academy Village. Mike, I believe you have this one for us tonight, 4.1.
Good evening and thank you. And I failed to mention that our applicant, I believe, is participating online. Do we have him online? Okay. In case any of the commissioners have a question for this proposal. As stated in the staff report and also as we discussed in our work meeting, this is a condition of approval that the Planning Commission had previously given for a commercial site within our city. This is the general location. We often refer to it as Academy Village. There are two halves of this commercial center. This is Pod 35. You may recall that in kind of this, on the far left side of the screen, this Pod 35 residential, the Planning Commission recently approved an Academy Terrace apartment building on that site. This is also the location at Pod 35P where the Lee's grocery store is located. And so this project is being developed, and what is before you tonight are 4 additional pads, the architecture for those pads. So the overall site plan has been reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission and also by our civil engineering. This was the first iteration of that site plan for the project. Again, you can see in the lower left-hand hand of the screen, the 35I or 1 and 2. That was the original kind of version of the apartment project. And then later on, that was changed with a single large building. The condition from the Planning Commission was that the final landscaping and the final building architecture would come back to the Commission for final approval. And so these are the 2 or the 4 buildings. Each kind of pad or section has 2 buildings within it. And then I included in my PowerPoint all of the building elevations. I don't really mean to display all of those to you, but if you wanted me to jump to any of them, if you had any questions or concerns. But as you're going through this, you can see that it's the same architecture, but it's just kind of variations on a theme. And this is an architectural type that the Commission had previously approved on other pads within the center. But you'll see from building to building that they're changing the composition of the exterior materials. Here we have a slightly different banding, kind of in that cornice area. This project has been reviewed by Wasatch Commercial, and we did receive an Architecture Review Committee approval letter on the project. Again, I'll just fly through these, and then if you have any questions, follow-up questions, we can come back to them. These are the conditions that were listed in your staff report. Since then, the applicant has delivered to staff an amended site plan that shows this pedestrian connection between Autumn Spring Drive, Pad 35E, and Pad 35F. So that was in your staff report, but they have demonstrated compliance with that to staff. And then they've also submitted a revised parking study that demonstrates that compliance with the standards that were associated with the master development agreement. So staff is recommending approval. You can, for the record, if you wish, still include all three of these conditions, but technically the one that is really outstanding is the first one. We just want to make sure we have this overall landscape summary table as requested by our landscape or our landscape architect.
Okay. Any questions for Mike? Yeah, go ahead.
The confirmation. The elevations that you showed don't call out which materials are what. It's fairly safe to, I mean,
Yeah,
you
it was.
see what they are.
Yeah.
But what I want to confirm is that it meets what's in the MDA, that the materials will meet what's in the MDA.
Yes, yeah. And that's why we did make sure we had that review committee's approval letter that documented that.
Documents that it does have the materials that meet what.
That were in the MDA, yeah. And again, this is the really, really similar to what the Planning Commission had previously approved.
And it does
Yeah.
look similar to the lease.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions for Mike? Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. If the applicant is online, if there's anything more you would like to present to us, other than what Mike's already done, just state your name for the record and provide any additional information, please.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Great, yeah.
So Alex Dahlstrom with Wasatch Commercial Developers. Mike did a great job presenting this. This is kind of our phase 2 of the retail portion. So one of you mentioned that this looks like the Lees and the inline retail. And then as Mike mentioned, we did get approval on pads 35M and N. And so that was kind of wrapping up our phase 1. And then this is going into phase 2 with these 4 buildings, which will be followed by an additional 3. So we're kind of cutting our phase 2 into 2 sections, this being the first. So these buildings do look similar to M&N. Addressing the materials, we are using the same materials as we used on M&N that were previously approved. So that's all I have. If any other questions, feel free to ask.
Any other questions for the applicant, for Alex? Okay. Thank you very much. With that, I'd like to open this up to any discussion at Planning Commission. Or I will entertain a motion as well.
I can make a motion.
Okay, go ahead.
I make a motion to approve item 4.1 with staff's, I'm sorry, I can't remember if there's 3 or 4. Three recommendations.
Yep. We have a motion by Adam.
Second.
Second by Daryl. We'll go ahead and have a roll call vote for Brody.
Yes.
Adam.
Yes.
Heather.
Yes.
Jackson.
Yes.
Daryl.
Yes.
And Andrea.
Yes.
All right, that motion passes. Thank you very much. All right, we'll now move on to our legislative items. Before I do so, both of these items are up for a public hearing, so I will go ahead and read the public comment policy and procedure for those that would like to make a comment. The purpose of the public comment is to allow citizens to address items on the agenda. Citizens requesting to address the commission will be asked to complete a written comment form and present it to the Deputy City Recorder. In general, the chair will allow an individual 3 minutes to address the commission. A spokesperson recognized as representing a group in attendance may be allowed up to 5 minutes, and this policy also applies to all public hearings. So with that, we'll turn the time over to Bryce. I believe you have this to review and for our review and consideration of the proposed transportation master plan.
Okay, yeah, I'll go through this pretty fast, but feel free to slow me down if I go over anything too fast and if you have questions on anything. Essentially, since 2019, we've been working on an update to our transportation master plan, and the transportation master plan essentially sets our roadway network, and we run different scenarios. In this case, we have a current scenario, a 2030 scenario, and a 2050 scenario. And with running these scenarios, we're able to see, okay, if our general plan develops as we've planned, how much traffic ends up on our roads and what are the impacts. And then at those horizons, we look at, okay, if we do nothing, what does our roadway network look like? And then add improvements to make it so that our roadway connectivity and delays are minimized. The delays minimized and the connectivity is optimized. Also, as this goes to City Council, it's also the backbone for building impact fees that are charged to developments as they come in to help them pay their fair share towards the impacts to our roads. So this is how we kind of get to those numbers. So there's a lot of information here. We'll talk about background and current conditions, how we got the data and what data we use to get our traffic numbers and to run the models. And then we'll talk about some specific areas in the city, and then go into what were the results, what are the recommended projects that are outlined in the Transportation Master Plan. So we're all familiar with the red area on the screen. That's Olympia that was annexed into Harriman recently. The blue area was, at the time when we were looking at the study, a possible future annexation area. We now know that that's no longer likely going to be the case. And then High Country area was also considered if there was ever a need to annex that area, what would be the impacts to our roads. So we hired a consultant a couple years ago to work on Harriman City projections based on our general plan and also on projected kind of where we're at today, where we were with the census data, and inputting that information into the model that gives us the traffic numbers. You will see we have pretty high projections compared to Wasatch Front Regional Council, and that's in general what we've seen in Harriman, that we have a little bit more than is projected. If you look at the 2030 numbers, that's a big gap, right? Almost 60,000 with the Wasatch Front Regional Council projection versus our 93,000. As you're probably aware, we're probably at or already past their 2030 projections on our city population right now as of today. So this just kind of takes the overall regional model, which is run by Wasatch Front Regional Council, and just zooms into Harriman and dials it in a little bit more for what we're seeing for our area. A big consideration in the Transportation Master Plan is safety. So pedestrian safety, vehicle crashes, where are they happening, why are they happening? And then there are mitigations recommended in the master plan to bring down the crashes, to provide a safer environment for pedestrians. And here's, there's a few kind of recommendations here, but kind of more detailed in the draft Transportation Master Plan. So this is our essentially our baseline, or what we worked with when we began the effort, where we're at as far as if you look at our traffic counts versus the capacity of the roads. As you can tell, and you'll see this is kind of the theme of all of our maps, is as you get closer to Mountain View and the connections to Mountain View, it gets a lot busier. In general, we do pretty good outside of there, but our major arterials collecting into Mountain View and towards Bangerter often get a little bit heavy on traffic. These are the kind of the different roads that we could apply to the model to kind of see how it reacted with the traffic numbers, and kind of a tiered system here. 3 lanes, which is what we call a minor collector, and then there's an option for a major collector. The major collector has a buffered bike lane and a higher speed than the minor collector. The minor collector is just a standard bike lane. So it calls it out as shoulder there, but we consider that a bike lane. And then as you go up to 5 lanes, minor arterial and major arterial, again, buffered bike lanes on both of those. Essentially anything over a speed limit of 35 was recommended a buffered bike lane, which can be just striping, or it can be a protected bike lane with a curb. We generally don't see that much in Utah due to snow and plows and the issues, but there are some areas like in Provo where they've incorporated these protected bike lanes. And I should say this kind of follows back to our active transportation plan that we passed about 1.5 years ago. That kind of guides the side treatments for shoulders. So this is an area of the city that's kind of in flux. You'll see that our master plan doesn't have this alignment, but we wanted to cover that UDOT is moving towards this alignment that we're showing here on the west end of Harriman. It's the realignment of U111 study, and they are analyzing this right now. So this is likely going to be the final outcome. It's not finalized yet. When it is finalized, we may come back with another update to the master plan to show the impacts of what this does compared to what we modeled here. So it's a little bit different. There is some distribution effects on whether if you go straight north-south or versus kind of curving that road, that yellow road in. But we will kind of wait and see how that pans out. So here's the functional classification, or those cross sections of road, the type of roads that we showed before, and showing kind of, okay, what are they today, and then what do we propose they need to be in 2050 to make this work? So on the right, you'll see that if it's not a road, it's a new road, it'll be dotted, and then if it's a widening road, it'll be darker. And then, so like I said, we run scenarios at 2030 and 2050. Minimum build means we're not widening any roads, but we're just building the roads to serve a development versus, okay, we've ran that and we see we need improvements. The improvements are built in, and that's the build. And so we can kind of see an example of this. So this is 2030, our scenario, and LOS stands for level of service. How well is the road serving the user? And then the legend there kind of gives you an idea of capacity of the road being used. So green is it's less than 50% used. Light green, you're getting to 3/4% of the used. Yellow is reaching capacity, and red is going over capacity where you see major delays. So you see some of those areas, if we don't widen, what happens, or if we don't add certain roads, what happens. 134th is a big one. 126 is a big one. 118 is a big issue. And so based on that, and then 2050, kind of same idea. If we don't widen the roads, where are we going to see the most congestion? 134th again, 126, 118, a lot of our major corridors. And then going back to 2030, if we do build, a lot of that red goes away. A lot of the red you're seeing here is just outside of our borders that we will plan to work with Riverton and with UDOT to try and mitigate those. But as you can tell, that there is some traffic in between Mountain View and Bangerter, almost on every road outside of Harriman and even into Harriman that cause a lot of traffic issues. So there are a few, if we go back to 2030, that are red despite our additions, and there's kind of a threshold of how much we can do. And so these are just addressing those that are red. 118th South, we are not planning on widening yet in the phase 1 project. That's partly in plan with South Jordan. It's half South Jordan's road as well as Harriman's road. So they plan as a phase 2 project, meaning after 2030. And as we look at the numbers, it's kind of right on the threshold of being over and under capacity. And so that's why we don't show an improvement there. And then Harriman Boulevard, or 126 South, like we said, it's just reaching a capacity that needs major improvements that may need, that are beyond our considerations of, like I said, we have an option for 7 lanes to go. That's like our top option. Beyond that, we probably need some help from UDOT or another agency. Yeah.
I just have a question. One of the major issues that I see is our inability to connect more to Bangerter through Riverton? Is there any considerations of like 138 or 144 and any of those south roads connecting over to Bangerter?
Yeah,
that would leave a ton of pressure on what we have with 126 and 134.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that is where you're seeing the draw because those make direct connections to Bangerter, right?
Yeah.
And so 138th, although it does not have a entrance onto Bangerter, right? It's a little bit roundabout if you take 138th to get to Bangerter. We are doing our part to show, hey, we want the connection all the way from Mountain View into Bluffdale and Harriman. And then it's working with our partners in Bluffdale and Riverton beyond there to make sure that those connections continue east. And then that's the same with 144 South, or in our section, that's also, we call that Real Vista. That's working with the neighboring city to make those connections, which we do push for. There has been some resistance in the past, but I think that those are important connections in the future for us.
And maybe one other point on Bangerter, those intersections on Bangerter will be the only ones, right? With the interchanges going in, there will not be any other opportunities for other interchanges or intersections with Bangerter at this point because of the nature of the spacing and the freeway type facility there'll be. So those are the interchange access points for Bangerter. There won't be any other opportunity for those as well.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then, so we talked about those red roads falling into the red and why we don't show improvements on them. Similar in 2050, we have some roads that turn red that we're not showing an additional improvement for. We already show one improvement, but that's not quite enough in 2050 to accommodate the traffic. So again, 126, the traffic we're seeing there is similar to the traffic that we see on University Parkway in Utah County. So it involves some heavy improvement that we're working with UDOT right now to lay out kind of scenarios that could accommodate this kind of traffic. And then the west Harriman Highway or Harriman Main Street, as you go further west, the land use is still not 100% nailed down. And so this just shows a 3-lane road. Like I mentioned, 2050 is hard to get a really accurate projection on. And so some of these roads that are close to needing to go from a 3-lane to a 5-lane, we may not show yet. And as we update it every couple of years, that may flip to a 5-lane, depending on how the land use kind of plays out in that area. Especially with like we talked about, the U111 final alignment will impact this area quite a bit. So that area, 134th, where it connects to Harriman Highway, is all a little bit undetermined for 2050 at this point. And as we get more information, we can kind of update that as it comes. And so those are kind of the bullet points that talk about those roads. So yeah, this is just, again, the area that's outside of Harriman that was planned on for traffic use that we have to accommodate. This is just kind of an idea of the general land use assumptions that were used for this area. As we mentioned, as we get a little bit more knowledge and a little more detail on the land use, we can kind of refine this a little bit more. So transit is a part of the transportation master plan. Right now, there are no bus routes in Harriman. There is what we call micro transit or on-demand transit through UTA. It's like an Uber service, not maybe quite point to point as Uber is, but it is an on-demand transit service that serves Harriman. And their goal there from UTA is to get individuals from their home or from businesses over to their main transit line. So for us, it's the red line or the front runner to get residents over there. But in the regional transportation plan, there are 3 transit corridors that are in the regional transportation plan, and they're shown here. The main one is that blue one that comes down into the town center. The corridor has been preserved. We have the right-of-way for a transit service, and currently we are in the middle of a study with Wasatch Front and with UTA to kind of look at what are the best uses of these corridors that we've already preserved. What are the best uses, what modes are the best use, and what kind of stations, stops, locations can we use with these corridors. And then this is our active transportation plan, so it's a lot of information to look at here. But this was incorporated. There's intersection improvements, there's bike paths, there's trail connections, what type of trail, if it's a paved trail or a dirt trail, a primitive trail we call that, or a dual trail, which means we have paved and an equestrian trail next to it. So this kind of lays out our non-vehicle transportation plans. Okay, and then these are, with all of that said, this is probably more the key map that most people look for. What are the future roadway plans based on all of this modeling? And we break it into phases, 3 phases, from today to 2030, from 2030 to 2040, and then from 2040 to 2050. So that phase 1's to 2030s in red, phase 2 from 2030 to 2040s in blue, and phase 3 is from 2040 to 2050 is in green. And then the dotted lines are new roads, and the solid lines are widening projects. And then obviously widening roads isn't the solution all of the time. Sometimes it's not a capacity of the road, and most of the delays that we see are at intersections, right? At traffic signals, at stop signs. And so we also looked at, okay, where could we improve intersections overall to reduce delay and maybe reduce the need to widen a road because the issue is more at the intersection rather than the road segment. And so these are the intersection improvements that are recommended in the Transportation Master Plan.
In the Transportation Master Plan, did they do studies because I think everybody will agree from 134th from Mountain View, basically through the CVS area, that part has major slowdowns there, currently, and I was curious. I don't see anything showing or highlighted there.
Yeah, so if it's minor signal adjustments or coordination, those may not show on the map. These are if we're changing infrastructure, say installing a new right turn lane.
Gotcha.
Or a free right, that's one of the improvements on Main Street onto 126, where we're putting in a pork chop island and having a free right. So there is some consideration that you're not seeing in here, that like you're saying, 134th, where there is already a bunch of signals. There can be signal improvement. There can be minor things that we can work with before infrastructure's needed to upgrade.
But it is showing 134 South, some improvements on your other figures, right? So those would be taken into account. Intersection improvements
That's
would
what
happen.
I just noticed is a lot of roadways, but that area is failing right now.
Yeah. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, and that's all I have, so I can answer any questions.
Any questions?
I know this is a bit of a prognostication. Mountain View Corridor, does that affect, when that turns into a freeway, did that affect your projections?
Yes,
And
yes.
what did you use for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our 2030 scenario that we ran did assume that it became a freeway at that point. So
At 2030?
yeah, by 2030, that improvement was made, and then therefore the impacts were felt on the model and then on our roads based on that.
Okay.
Can you describe what the intersection improvements on 2-3 is, the top of the hill on Rosecrest Road?
Yeah, no, that's a really
I wanna
good
know.
question.
I go through that
So
all
that
the
is
time.
purposely left vague, I guess I should say. Right now, it is a four-way stop, which no one likes. There is a sight distance issue, so we can't just take away the stop signs. So there is some consideration if a roundabout would work there, or if a traffic signal would work there, or if there's some other system that would work there. honestly, it doesn't warrant a traffic signal, the traffic doesn't, and the only reason we have a four-way stop there now is because of the sight distance issue. So it's left, I guess, purposely vague, so that we can study that a little bit more and come up with a solution as the time goes on.
I'd vote for a roundabout there, but that's me. Off the record, of course.
Or just do a signal that's green always for the few, for the few times it doesn't need to be.
I like roundabout, slow them down. All right, anyhow. Okay, any other questions for Bryce? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank
Appreciate
you.
that. So this is on for a public hearing. So we will, at this time, I will go ahead and open up for, open up the public hearing for comment at this time. Is there anything online? Okay. By way of procedural, we discussed this in our last work session where I'm not allowed, we have to have a motion to close the public hearing. Help remind me, do we vote on that, or is it just a motion and a second and then it's closed, or do we, is there a vote? I don't know what the requirement actually is on. I think we'd probably
Let's go for it. I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
All right,
I'll second.
we got a motion by Adam and a second by Heather. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Look at that, we
Any
did our
opposed?
first one.
We'll just do it that way. I like that. Okay, public hearing is closed for item 5.1. Is there any further discussion from Planning Commission now at this time?
I don't have any. I was going to say, obviously, our staff's done a great job. I do think we're kind of missing, and this is more for city council because it gets into bigger right-of-ways. When we widen a road, we take out the landscaping. I've said it a couple of times, and so that it's kind of hard because we're conflicted because we're here for safety, but we're also here for look of the and feel of the community. And I feel like some of these widenings is actually going against that. But I get that we have to connect A to B with traffic, so it's kind of a tough dilemma there.
And if the city council is willing, there are, park strips, opportunities there. It is narrowed up, for sure, but there is some opportunities for some beautification with those park strips as well.
And that's what I wonder in the future, maybe the right-of-way we claim, especially on areas that we haven't developed, maybe we should go a little wider
Yeah,
so that you could actually get the landscaping we're talking about and put the trees where they should be. I'm just using the 134 example that I used earlier. But again, I totally get the engineer side. I just feel like we're kind of pinching ourselves already down into this criteria because we're just trying to go pavement.
Could we,
And we're not thinking about maybe the extra right-of-way that would really make and beautify the community.
or could we suggest that perhaps there's some beautification to the center lane?
Could be.
Yeah, I like
And,
that.
something better than what Riverton gave us on 134th with rocks, but,
Yeah, just lots of rocks.
yeah. But if we had some nice trees, some of the planting that is to either side,
Incorporate it into
Where
the
you don't
center
need-
rather than,
yeah.
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 and that can help circulation by cutting off left turns out of the middle lane.
provide some safety benefit, for sure.
It's just something that I think we need to look long-term at as we look to these future plans and things like that. But other than that, I think it looks great.
Any other discussion? Again, this is up for a recommendation to city council.
So I guess I can go ahead and do it.
I think that, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think that if we know of certain roads that will definitely be impacted that do not belong to UDOT, we should be actively seeking funding for preserving the corridor. The right-of-way is expensive. I mean, it can be as much as the construction cost. So, and it can make or break a project, so I think I'd be recommending to preserve the corridor sooner than later.
And I believe that because of this approval of this plan, that is a mechanism then at that point that the city council can use to help preserve corridor. Is that correct, Bryce? Maybe quick clarification there. That's a very good point, Darren.
I just
Yeah,
don't
that's
know how.
a great point. By adopting the transportation master plan, we are able then to essentially require those roads to be preserved. Now, whether we have to compensate for them or not is another discussion, but if they're on our master plan and adopted by the city council, then we have the ability to require those corridors as development comes in to be dedicated.
And if it's to potentially impact an existing homeowner and they're a willing seller, then at that point, the city could have that opportunity as well
Yes.
to preserve through
Yes,
acquiring
exactly.
property they
So,
need.
so it doesn't enforce anything on existing property owners, but if they go to subdivide or develop their property, that's when we can ask for the corridor to be preserved for the roads that are in the master plan.
Yeah.
Do you
I
know?
think as far as extra widening for landscape, I like that notion, but I don't think you can actually use preservation funds to acquire additional right-of-way beyond what's planned,
For beautification, for.
Correct,
Yeah,
correct.
for landscaping.
Yeah.
I think that probably.
You can
Like
do
what
it,
Adam
but
was
it'd be
saying,
on
like
the
you can use
city's
that
nickel.
center lane and beautify it, and then you have where you can make left-hand turns, kind
Well,
of like
there's-
what
If
Dave
it
Brake's
doesn't
done.
widen the right-of-way any further.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I really think it's on the city's dime, and knowing that process, that's expensive. That's really expensive.
I would be
Yeah.
curious on the typical sections that you were showing there too. If, this is for instance, if maybe you showed a wider park strip, but the sidewalk further away, that would provide an opportunity
That-
for
that's
some
what I-
additional landscaping. Is that what you were kind of
That's
getting
what I
at?
was gonna say,
More
is
of
that
a- more
I
of the park
get
strip area.
beautification in the center, but I also think, we talk a lot about, walkability, and people will not walk a road that's 4-lane highway with only 5-foot
5-foot
landscape.
buffer.
There's just no way.
It'll be
It
loud
won't
and-
be, it won't be comfortable, and so, I mean, if you go look at like 134th already down by, below below like the KFC area, you can see where, and being a person that's actually walked there, it is so loud, it's not comfortable to walk there. And so I just think maybe in the future, we need to consider maybe increasing the landscaping to provide more safe walking routes that feel safe, and therefore do promote walking, which does offset the size of the roads. So I think it's kind of a catch-22 a little bit, but it's something I think we really need to think about. And I think sometimes in our typical sections, we just try and, we go, oh, wow, we're already at 106 feet. We don't want to go any wider. I get that.
We're 116, but yes.
But I think increasing some of that landscaping, which is what I will incorporate in my recommendation. So.
Do you know?
wanna
I have
go-
one question.
Yeah.
Do you know? Is there going to be any connection between Harriman and Bluffdale, like on 144 and 150?
Yeah, that's a great question.
That's a very political question.
So we have taken that question to council, and so Harriman has historically shown that connection while Bluffdale has not. It does require both parties to agree, right? Harriman, the city council has agreed we wouldn't build a road without making that connection without Bluffdale's permission. So the answer is yes, we would love for those connections to happen if Bluffdale would allow it.
Yeah. I hope they'll be good neighbors.
Not yet, but anyhow, yeah. Right now, they're pushing back on that, so, okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I'd like to make a motion, if no one else has any more comments, to recommend approval of 5.1 to council with the suggestion that council considers in the future possible increase of landscape improvements, comparing the idea of what, and I know staff can iterate what I mean by what you'll see between the 134 expansion and what really happens. It will definitely make it very safe for cars, but it will not make it very safe for people. And so that's something I think council will need to help guide that vision in the future to staff, since it is a financial burden.
I'll second that.
I have a motion by Adam and a second by Brody. We'll go ahead and call for a vote. Andrea?
Yes.
Daryl?
Yes,
Jackson?
Yes?
Heather?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
And Brody?
Yes.
All right, that moves forward as a recommendation to city council with the one amendment as well. So thank you very much. We'll go ahead and move on to item 5.2. I believe Clint has this one. Yeah.
Well, good evening. So this is a request from the former Game Point MDA. It's now Mountain
Midas Creek
Midas
Plaza.
Midas Creek Plaza, thank you. So slight name change there. This is the property just north of the Auto Mall. It came in for a, it's a little closer in view, but it was, the MDA for this property was approved in 2019. And then COVID hit and changed some market conditions, and the applicant is back to propose an amended use that is more amenable to the market, which includes restaurant pads, some multi-use buildings, and an office building. In terms of compliance with the general plan and zoning, both of them show this area as being commercial, completely consistent with what they're proposing to do, so no concerns there. As the plan came in, we were provided with an amended MDA document, a conceptual site plan, and then some pictures of the proposed building elevations. So this is some of the, from what the applicant provided, these were some of the amenities and building concepts that were provided. In terms of uses, indoor recreation is still on the proposed uses there. Office, retail, restaurant, general. So there's a difference in restaurant general versus restaurant fast food. Restaurant general is like your sit-down restaurant. It doesn't allow or doesn't include drive-throughs, where the restaurant fast food does. And speaking with the applicant when they paid their fee last week, I just asked that that was something that they wanted to include, and it sounds like that is. So we made that clarification there through the staff report recommendations as well. And then it talks about, the MDA talks about the design guidelines, and that refers to those pictures that were provided. So we provided some documentation to kind of help shore that up and make that a little more digestible and clarified it a little bit more. Where this is a negotiated process, we also felt like there was some opportunity to get some betterments out of it. From conversations with the applicant, it sounds like they're amenable to that as well. Nothing major in terms of, you know, what can and can't happen there, just in the form that it takes. These are some quick items of issues of consideration that we can go through. The parking, subdivision, architecture, and landscaping, these will largely just be under city ordinance as is. In terms of architecture, some of the things that we've talked about in the past, the idea is that they'll comply with the C2 zone with a 60% brick and stone on each elevation of the building. But there was some discussion about adding metal or some other attractive materials to the exterior of buildings that could potentially make it look even better. So that was something that we also proposed in the design guidelines, was to allow some of those additional materials to take place upon Planning Commission consideration, and set a few standards in there in terms of, like, if you were to do metal, that it had to be a certain quality and grade, that had to be, the fasteners had to be hidden, those kinds of things. So these are some of the recommendations to the design guidelines to hopefully make some improvements to what was being proposed. One of the things that we felt like this, on a corner, on a corner lot, that there's an opportunity to kind of provide some placemaking there, to make it not look like just any other development that takes place any other place in the state or the region. Some of those recommendations would be to gather the buildings at the corner, put more of the massing on the corner, provide some kind of tower element that signifies that you've arrived at a certain development. If they didn't want to do that or opted to do something else, there's also an option to do a kind of a landscape treatment at that corner to also signify, arrival at a development. They've provided for an outdoor dining area on their conceptual site plan between a couple of restaurants. And we're also, where this is, including some office buildings, a lot of multi-use buildings as well, we are recommending an option to also include an additional just general gathering area where anybody could go sit down, take a break, enjoy the shade, whatever the case might be. So these are some building massing examples that we've kind of run through. Nothing formal, of course, just to give an idea of these 3 types of treatments. The top right is what they've proposed. Then there's a landscaped entrance that again, gives that landscape feature on the corner, and then an example of what that corner massing might look like along that street frontage. Another one of the clarifications that we wanted to make is to provide, and this is something that we've talked about a lot in here, is to provide a pedestrian plan for the entire site. When Teton Commercial came through, for example, this was one of the considerations and concerns that we had, that, you know, how are we going to move pedestrians safely through the site? And again, these recommendations that are being shown here, it doesn't mean they all have to take place, but these are some recommendations that could take place to help move pedestrians through the site a little more safely. But this, we do recommend that some kind of sidewalk or pedestrian plan be put together to show how people move back and forth just on foot versus in a car. Again, this is going back to what I mentioned earlier. The applicant, they intend to comply with the C2 standards, and then as part of the recommendations, we're asking for additional materials that are, you know, of the same kind of durability or quality that could be approved by the Planning Commission, and then recommending 30% glazing on the ground floor on all buildings. And then they are showing this one drive-through on their site plan, and in our recommendations, we also state that that should only be allowed for one of the buildings to have a drive-through. So it preserves that corridor, or that frontage between the street front and the building for pedestrians, more so than a whole bunch of drive-throughs that we've been getting. And then one of the last recommendations we're making is just for screening of cars, so to provide some additional screening from the public right-of-way into the development where you have cars adjacent to the public right-of-way. So in terms of our recommendations, this is a list of those. We went over a whole bunch of them. This first one, the application and fee, I should mention that has taken place. I came in and made that recommendation, or it covered that on Friday, so everything is in the clear that way. And just to give some precedent imagery for the corner massing and glazing, these are some examples locally. The building on the bottom right, I believe, is the project in Saratoga. Okay. I'm glad I picked the right building. But these other buildings are found, elsewhere in the region. Just to kind of give an idea of, what corner massing might look like or how it appears in other places. And then this was a little bit harder to find, just some precedent imagery for the corner landscaping and entry and plaza area. This imagery on the left here that has that kind of a 3D view, that's on 118th and State Street, just adjacent to the Shields development. You've got a plaza out front, and then as you go down and then go between those two buildings, that bottom picture shows kind of the plaza back behind. It's a nice amenity for the area. And then these other two were just pulled from the internet, just for some ideas on how that might look or feel. So that being said, this is up for consideration in terms of recommendation to the City Council. If there's things that you've looked through that as you've analyzed this, if there's things that you feel are appropriate to move forward to the City Council, that would be what we would ask to have be done. So if there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer whatever I can.
Great. Any questions for Clint on this one? Okay, thank you very much. We'll give opportunity for the applicant if there's anything more you want to add, or if you're good with what's been presented, that's fine as well. Yeah.
Really grateful. My name is Jared Osmond. I'm here representing the ownership on that. So we like to do really great projects, and we're excited to be here. One of the things we found, I would love to suggest more than one drive-through. I know that might be a sticking point, but We found through COVID that drive-throughs are recession-proof and COVID-proof. So we like to give that option. All of our restaurants and our American Fork properties during COVID came together to deliver restaurant food that kept those restaurants alive. So those restaurants that were actually on the ground, that didn't have a drive-through, came through the drive-through section to deliver meals or to create at least a place for people to pick things up. And so as much as, drive-throughs can be pretty, you can do it right. We don't need a drive-through on every building, but I would love to add at least one more. That would be my recommendation for the space. And I think you attract some really great tenants. Most restaurants, unless they're a true sit-down, and we are looking at those, and we have great restaurants that want to follow us, sushi restaurants, we've got Blue Lemon, others that are looking. We've got a lot of things like that, but most restaurants now are going to a drive-through component because of what happened during COVID. They're very afraid of something like that happening again. And it does help to have that. So I would like to suggest that, if possible, to at least have two. But happy to answer any of your questions if you have anything for me.
Great. Any questions for the applicant?
This might be a little specific, but on the drive-through that you do show, what is the stacking, or do you know how many cars that will
Well, our
accommodate?
stacking, we want to make sure it's as big as possible, and we can certainly address that. We can show the stacking. I'll never do a drive-through unless I can get at least 10 in that queue. In the stacking, we've seen some real problems if you get less than that, and it backs up into the parking lot, and there's a lot of problems, a lot of placement of where the signs go, or the menu board, and where you finally pick it up. So it's just a matter of doing it right and having an engineer look at that. And so we'll make sure that we have plenty. If we need to create another, little lane for an out, we can do that as well, as long as it meets the criteria for landscape and everything else. But we're happy to show that on the buildings and pick. If we could get 2 drive-throughs, I'd try to put them on 2 of the bigger buildings so we have more stacking through
By
that.
stacking, you mean going around the building like you're
Yes,
showing?
correct.
So if you had a second, it would also go around the building?
It would. It makes more sense to do that, to go around the building and then buffer it with landscaping to kind of hide that. But it's a good functional way to do it. Yeah.
I know several places have been going to 2 lanes coming in.
Yeah, we've done that several times, and I like it. Short of getting a Chick-fil-A that's going to back up into the next city, it usually works. So, yeah,
Okay.
and we can definitely show that. We're going to push for as much stacking as possible to alleviate that. So,
Okay.
Where do you feel, so there's 2 pieces where it's going with building massing or creating a gathering area, which one do you lean to?
well, on the examples that we're showing here, I don't really love that corner massing.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of intimidating coming into it. It doesn't leave a lot of glazing that you can see. I like to have the building separate, where you can have the glazing and the nice roof lines rather than this big corner of wall. I think you just do more with the landscaping element, introduce rock or a fountain or something cool or a sign that is approved. I think we can do a lot of really great things with the right plan. We've got great designers on landscape that will bring something forward, but I would prefer to keep those buildings, separated
And do
out.
some, like a gathering area?
Yeah, I think a gathering area makes a lot of sense, a common area to sit down and eat, or just, gather. And that sidewalk that connects, that's definitely part of our plan as well, to have everything connected and everything safe for pedestrians and ADA compliant.
So more like the one by Shields?
Yeah,
that you had in the picture there? Okay.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, right.
These are, of course, just elements. And we're aware that there has been some conversation about the potential of having a significant restaurant
Yes.
location. And we were just thinking, there might be an opportunity to strengthen that corner with that type of a use potentially.
Yeah.
Not necessarily having the interconnected building, but just, yeah.
We've
So
had-
again, it was just a concept.
Right, yeah, and the way that we do things, we typically come in and build things on spec. We've got some great developments through the area here in Utah County, Salt Lake County, that we've done. And honestly, it's as we've put forward the design ideas, we've had tenants really show up. And as I mentioned in the work meeting, that we've got tenants that really want to follow us. We provide a good product for them, and we're good on the terms. And so we do have some really amazing interest from some really big players, great restaurant additions to the city that would be amazing and provide that entertainment value. I'm entertained when I eat, so, to me, it seems to make sense, but it would really be amazing. And we're excited, and we're happy to to do that build to suit and make it really architecturally pleasing, we're happy to spend more money on architecture and landscaping because we want it to be a destination for our tenants. And I think it'll beautify everything that's going on over there instead of just cars everywhere. So,
Because, this is a destination and likelihood of families going there is pretty high,
yes.
or teenagers out on a date or something. That's a big parking lot. Is there a way to incorporate some safety elements into that parking lot? Perhaps a
Absolutely.
walkway, through a sea of asphalt?
Yes.
Have something in there?
100%. We've talked about that a little bit. Right now, we're just trying to show parking stalls and the most efficient way to do it. And the most efficient way to park that many buildings is to have that central parking lot as things overflow. Because you're going to have, we're hoping to bring a breakfast spot, which seems to be non-existent in this area. We want to bring a really nice breakfast spot, which will take up a lot of parking in the morning. And then the restaurants at night that'll take over. And so having that kind of cross parking across it, but we definitely have islands and things that will be put in place and different design criteria that will help with the safety and flow of that, and also to meet the ADA standards as we come in and out of that. So we'll have some protective elements there for sure, and they'll be landscaped through the parking lot. It won't just be a sea of asphalt. So you'll see some of those changes. Right now, it's all conceptual.
Maybe that's a question I now have for city staff. With this being an MDA requirement, are we going to be able to have that opportunity to then see these, the future plans come before us as well, right? I know we're approving the MDA, but, or the recommendations for the MDA, but we want to make sure we have that opportunity to
Yeah, the
to
MDA
review
is
that.
just the agreement. I don't believe it would require, I mean,
We would still see,
Clint, right? I mean, we'd still be able to see it. I think they're
having a sidebar over there. That's okay.
we'd be able to see the site plan another time is what we're trying to
Right.
say,
The
right?
intent would be, of course, as development proceeds, there would be elements of that would come back to the planning
Right.
commission.
This approval is not going to negate that opportunity for us to be able to see that as it progresses. So we'll have those opportunities, I guess, at that point to discuss pedestrian flow and safety and the second potential drive-through if that's what's coming. But that'll be,
And we look forward to showing that on the plans and showing you why I think that works with the right landscaping. And I really do think it's a great benefit to, not just to bring in great tenants, because a lot of these bigger, nicer restaurants even are incorporating drive-throughs. I think it's just a really great element to have if we ever have something, heaven forbid. I was gonna say plandemic, but I won't get political. But if we ever have something like that again happen, we can at least be able to incorporate some of what we did in American Fork at that particular location. But we're excited to show you these design elements, so.
now we're looking forward to seeing future as well. Yeah, Tara.
What kind of tenants do you expect to see in the office space?
Well, I have found that the medical tenants seem to really like integrating with the restaurant tenants for some reason. So out in Saratoga Springs, we have a spa Trouvé, we've got a family therapist, we've got a dentist that's now going to come down into one spot. The building's kind of been quartered out, and then we've got Revere Medical as kind of the anchor tenant. And a few of those tenants want to follow. And so it's just when you bring a pocket of really great restaurants and great, this kind of cross advertising that happens, places like these medical spas and therapists and what have you, they seem to want to gravitate to those commercial spots, those retail spots for the advertising. So
You'll see that even with the second story.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Even medical going up on the second
Right,
story,
yeah,
things like that.
yeah.
Okay.
So we're excited about it. Yeah.
Great discussion. Anything else?
I don't have any more questions. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is open for a public hearing, so at this time, I'll go ahead and open this up for any public comment. I don't see any public here. Anything online coming in from the group? All right, with that, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to close public hearing.
Well, I was going to talk about the second drive-through. I mean,
Well, let's close the public hearing, and then
Okay.
we can have further discussion after the public hearing is closed.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
I have a motion.
second.
And a second by Brody. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, go ahead with
I was just going to
discussion,
say, I
further
know
discussion.
the second drive-through obviously usually gets higher rents for that type of setup.
Can we go back to the,
The site plan.
The site plan?
Yeah.
Yeah, who's in charge of the, can you get to, there you go. That's okay. Keep going. Almost there. Maybe. There it is. That's probably the best one. So it looks like from this, that upper center, right next to the two-story office, is the current drive-through layout.
Again, this was just really trying to show proportionality.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I would say as far as with the drive-throughs, those tend to provide a little more activity,
Yeah.
bring a little more excitement to the space. I'm not necessarily opposed to them when they get incorporated well, and work with landscape.
And I've seen them on sit-down restaurants have a drive-through, especially after COVID. I get it that this is, a pretty picture, this is just concept, but you can see the need for sidewalks intermixed.
Yeah, there's a lot more work to be done
There's a
with
lot
this.
more to be
Yeah.
done.
With this
One of the
layout.
reasons I think we also talked about possibility of limiting the drive-through is they're showing all these great images of outdoor seating spaces, and you take two of these buildings and loop them with a drive-through around it, you really start to limit where those gathering places can happen. Right now, again, this is just a concept, but you really almost have one, seating space. So we were just trying to see if there's a way to have a second opportunity for
They
some
almost-
gathering areas.
They almost need the cafe dining in front, go for an extra
Yeah,
wide sidewalk.
potentially.
If we could get an extra wide sidewalk in the front, maybe we get an extra wide sidewalk in exchange for a second.
This was also why we started really focusing on that, kind of that corner entry, because that's
Yeah.
another opportunity, that
That'd
Clint
be a great
showed in the
spot for,
presentation. Yeah.
like the one at Shields, that'd be a
Yeah.
great spot to have a sit-down and outdoor dining. But if we were to say, maybe we recommend allowing a second driveway if we have extra wide sidewalk in front, extra nice landscaping in front, where you can set up some, tables and chairs with umbrellas.
Obviously, if you have a stacking lane of just filled with idling, probably not the
Yeah.
greatest place to be trying to have an outdoor dining experience. So
They've tried,
you'd have to figure that out.
they've tried similar things with Chick-fil-A's, where they have outdoor dining, and then they've got the drive-through that kind of goes around them, and they're always empty. They're just not used. In the South, where, it's temperate weather. It's more normal to
Yeah.
sit
But
outside.
yeah, you just don't want to be.
Yeah, you don't want to be
inhaling
surrounded
all
by
the
cars
exhausts.
when
Yeah,
you're out eating at a nice restaurant.
yeah.
Well, I could see him, like you said, that like seating area on that corner. If you moved those two restaurants up closer to the other building on the, I don't know what corner is, northwest.
Just encourage.
And,
don't
like,
get married
orient
with
the
site
building.
plan. It's more the concepts. Right?
Yeah.
It's all.
Yeah, exactly.
To me, it's not the plan, it's the text behind the plan, right?
Yeah.
And is the text behind the plan stating one drive-through? Is that?
That was
is
the recommendation.
That was the recommendation, okay. So whether or not we can, whatever the motion is on this, we can modify that
That starts to get into
recommendation.
the actual discussion between council and
Right.
staff,
Yeah.
not us.
Yep, exactly.
I feel fine about 2 drive-throughs, but I do like the gathering,
In the right-
central gathering place,
Yeah. in the
or
right-
outdoor seating.
Yeah,
That would be kind of the compromise.
Until we see a site plan, I really don't have anything to
Yeah,
comment on.
I'm good with staff's recommendations as they
Maybe
stand.
maybe we make it a way to say 2 drive-throughs with at least 2 separated outdoor gathering spaces.
That's a good
Maybe
idea.
there's
Yeah.
a way to require, say, if we have 2 separated outdoor dining spaces and 2 separated, maybe there's a way they can rework the site to do that.
I like that.
I
Sounds
think
like
that
you-
Is that a motion?
Sounds like you're
Go for it,
formulating a
Jackson.
motion to me, Jackson.
All right.
Any other discussion? Okay, go ahead. We'll entertain that motion, Jackson.
All right, so I'll make a motion to recommend approval to the city council for further discussion to include 2 drive-throughs, but at least 2 separated outdoor gathering dining spaces as well.
All right, we have a motion by Jackson.
I'll second.
We have a second by Brody. Go ahead and call for a vote. Brody?
Yes.
Adam?
Yeah.
Heather?
Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
Daryl?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
All right. That recommendation moves forward, City Council. So thank you for
Thank
your
you,
time.
guys.
Appreciate that. Looking forward to seeing even more as this progresses. So thank you.
Well, if
Thank you
you've-
very much.
Thanks.
If you've ever tried to get into the garage grill, you know how much we need it.
Tell
Enjoy.
Aaron it was a fierce debate and that you saved the day. Yeah.
All right, thanks. All right, very good. Any other comments by the commission members tonight?
I was hoping that Michael could talk to us about the Utah Trail Network real quick. That email you sent about the trail network.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
You sent out the email about the
Yeah.
trail network.
Could you tell us a little bit more?
Oh,
about
yeah. So it was just, as you know, the governor included this in his proposal before the legislature. And it was talked about in a Wasatch Front Regional Council meeting today. It's called PlanTAC. And it was just an opportunity to express support if you were interested, if you clicked on that link. I talked with Wendy about it. It's something that the city is supportive of. I'm not sure how well it's being received. Not all of the initiatives that the governor has proposed, the legislature has, been all on board with. But obviously, we are a community that is thriving on trails, and we want to do more. And to see our state leadership, wanting to continue that in our valley is, I think, very.
In the valley and the
Yeah,
state.
yeah,
Right,
in the state,
statewide.
yeah,
This
right,
is a
right, right.
statewide plan that they're
So I
wanting to
think,
do.
I thought it was a good thing to share with you, so,
So I had,
yeah.
so one comment I had is, one of the council members for North Salt Lake is on the FWRC. I think he's like the director or something. He recommended doing a resolution, like each city could do a resolution, so.
I don't know if that's something we've talked about. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Any other discussions? Good point. All right. Future meetings next week will be city council meeting. 2 weeks from tonight will be our next planning commission meeting. I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Adam. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good discussions. Yeah. Good stuff.
No, we are actually doing a development down in Arizona. where they want